It's a good question. I feel like I may have tried to do things the cheap way a lot of the times when it comes to the marketing. Instead of doing the niche down cash-based specific marketing group, I would just hire someone from my networking group who claims to be good at marketing. It's a good person, but they don't know how to market this niche. And so I've worked with someone more recently that's very niche down into the cash-based PT Facebook marketing, and it's gangbusters. It's awesome. Yeah. I mean, it works incredibly well, but it's also way more expensive, but way more effective. I'll take the expense if it works. Absolutely.
All right, we're rolling. Welcome, Greg. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Absolutely.
And I'll start by saying, what a fun and honor. Yeah, I'm so honored to have been a part of this practice growth that you've had in the past year. And I'm excited that we can now kind of take what you've done in the last few years and put it in front of the audience so that they can try to, take what they think fits and reproduce your success. But you've just done awesome these since I've known you, and it's been.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. I really do. This is great.
So, why don't you go ahead and tell us who you are and kind of bring us up to that point of you starting or deciding to start a practice. What got you there, and we'll go from there.
Perfect. Yeah. So I grew up in Louisiana. I was a baseball player and got injured because you can play year round in Louisiana, and just played too much, hurt my arm, and was in and out of therapy a lot as a kid. So like from 11 through 16, 17 years old, I was in therapy at least once or twice a year. So the place that I went was a private practice, and kind of got used to the profession, kind of got used to the private practice world, and always thought that a private practice was in my future. So I applied to physical therapy school up here in St. Louis, got accepted, moved here and everything. And then during school, it was kind of, it's hard to start a private practice. It takes too much money. It's going to be years, and you got to take the insurance and whatever they pay. And it was kind of coached out of me, I guess you could say, to an extent during school. So of course that was kind of gone from my mind when I started working for someone else right out of school. And then about 6 months in to working for corporate, I realized I was getting burnt out and hated it. I was not enjoying being an employee, was part of it. But I felt like there was no upward growth. I felt like I was limited in what I was able to do, allowed to do. Good people, just that was the nature of corporate therapy. So I guess, like I said, it was around 6 months in to being a therapist. I started looking for another way out. Like what other ways, started Googling how to be a therapist, but not be a therapist kind of situation. I found your podcast first. It was the first thing I ever found.
The Google search, how to be a therapist, but not be a therapist.
I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something like how to be a therapist, but not work in the clinic or something. Oh, okay. And somehow I found your podcast and kind of got hooked to it. And it was an eye-opening experience to where, okay, this is something I can do. This is something I can do. But I didn't really trust myself as a therapist just quite yet. I mean, I'm only 6 months out of school. So I kind of worked toward being able to apply into a residency program. And so so I applied and got accepted into that just a couple of years out of school. And during the residency, I actually met you in San Antonio at CSM.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I don't know if you remember that, but we've met in person.
Actually, I totally blanked on that though. I didn't realize, but when you say that, it flashed in my mind. Now I do remember meeting you there. Yeah.
Yeah. It was wherever I feel like there was like an after party, something in the basement of one of the hotels or something. I can't remember.
I can't fully remember all those. They all kind of run together for me now.
Right.
It's been a couple years since I've been to one. I'm starting to not run together, but
right. But anyway, that was kind of like, okay, I need to do this. I really don't want to go back after residency to working for someone else. So with 2 or 3 months left in the residency, I got a logo and got a website and, did all the actions that you need to hit the ground running. So I finished up my residency in August of 17 and then started this practice in October of 17. So I guess to answer your question, it was always kind of in me to do private practice, but it got coached out and then brought back by you.
Oh, thanks, man. That's awesome. I also didn't realize that you were listening to the podcast that early on or that far ahead. I didn't know if maybe you had already started your practice and then found me or what, but that's great, man. I always love hearing that. And I totally forgot we crossed paths in San Antonio. That's awesome. So, okay. So October 2017, you get started. What were you feeling like when you pulled the trigger and moved forward on it?
Well, I released the website to the world on October 1st, and I just assumed it would just kind of start happening. I had the patient site's website, and I had the logo, and I had everything set, and it was very slow. I was expecting, I don't know, I guess I was expecting magic to happen. And it just doesn't work that way. And I learned very quickly that, you've got to put yourself out there. You've got to meet people. You've got to find referral sources. You've got to figure out how to market. And those were things that I guess I took for granted in getting started. And honestly, I didn't even get my first client until December. So it was a scary couple of months trying to figure out, what am I doing? Is this going to work? There was a lot of doubt early on.
And so what happened from there?
So once I finally got my first client, and I actually got it through BNI, so the networking group, Business Networking International. For those of you who have never heard of it, it's basically small networking groups between 15 and 45 people per chapter. And so I had joined a chapter in December of 17 and got my first client through there, and fairly quickly built up to 8 to 10 people a week. And so it was a nice,
or 8 to 10 like total patients.
Yeah, not new patients.
Okay.
So maybe one every other week, couple a week in certain weeks. Just depends on, obviously, caseload and all that. But it was just a slow build, and I kind of hit some plateaus during that first year where, okay, networking is fine, but when I spend enough time networking, I'll get new patients. When I get new patients, then I have less time to network. And I was kind of in this constant roller coaster of, I can hustle for patients and get them, but then I don't have time to hustle anymore.
Yeah.
And, it was hard to develop those follow-up systems to make lifelong patients or to get referrals from those patients. And that just wasn't happening at the rate that I wanted in that first year.
Okay. So that first year was mostly just a networking approach. It got you started, but you weren't setting the world on fire at that time.
Right. And I didn't really know how to set proper goals for a business owner. I'd never managed a business. I'd never run a business before. I'd never been in a leadership role. So I didn't really know what I was doing, to be honest. It was just, I think this is the right move for me. I'm treating the way I want. I'm helping people in a better way. And that's positive, but you've got to make money doing it. You've got to be able to build the business around it.
Were you at that time already in the physical location that you're paying rent for?
I was, yeah. So I found a 120 square foot room for less than $400 a month just to have a physical spot. I thought about just starting travel first, or at home, whatever you want to call that. But that just wasn't really what I wanted to do.
Right on. And so you had a physical location. Did you have any staff early on or any administrative help?
No staff, just me. So it was just me and my wife. She would do some of the fax stuff on the back end, some behind the scenes stuff. But for the most part, for the first almost full 3 years, it was just me.
Okay. So after that first year, continuous down the path in your journey.
There was a lot. Just for me, I always have more ideas than I have time for. And there was a lot of try this, try a partnership, try to do events with gyms, try to partner with a gym to be their only guy on and be on site for them. And, these were all great ideas and they just didn't pan out. Either I didn't take the time to make sure that they would pan out properly initially, or just it was the wrong person. I think there was a lot of that. So it was a lot of the roller coaster, like I said, just trying to hustle for new patients, then know that you're going to have a fall where you got to bounce back. And so, my peak was maybe only 15 people in a week, just because I felt like I was constantly bouncing back and forth. I tried a few like magazine marketing type of thing, and all of that ended up being a waste of money. I tried a little bit of Facebook marketing and ended up being a waste of money. And, every time I thought this will be the thing that'll get me out of the roller coaster of networking and self-marketing and too busy with clients, ended up just being a waste of money. And there was a lot of frustration in the first 2.5 years for sure.
So just circling back on a couple of those topics, because I know that, for a lot of people, they've tried Facebook ads and felt like it was a waste, and others, that's like the main driver of their business. And similar, like with newspaper or magazine ads. So like knowing what you know now, looking back at it, do you feel like you were doing it the right way and it still flopped, or maybe that if you were doing those things again, that you'd have more success?
That's a good question. I feel like I may have tried to do things the cheap way. Mm-hmm. A lot of the times when it comes to the marketing, instead of doing the niche down cash-based specific marketing group, I would just hire someone from my networking group who claims to be good at marketing. It's a good person, but they don't know how to market this niche. And so I've worked with someone more recently that's very niche down into the cash-based PT Facebook marketing, and it's gangbusters. It's awesome. Yeah. I mean, it works incredibly well, but it's also way more expensive, but way more effective. I'll take the expense if it works. Absolutely. Yeah. Same thing with the paper marketing, whether it's magazine, newspaper, whatever, doing whatever the cheapest way to do it was never effective. So it probably would have been better to skip it all together or go all in. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of that, just trying not to break the bank. I didn't have to take out any loans to start the business. And I guess there was a part of pride where like, I didn't have to dig that deep to make it happen. Mm-hmm. But I distinctly remember my wife and I having a conversation early May last year, and that was in 2020, where it was like, all right, I feel like we've done okay. Like we're making a little bit of money, but it's not crushing it. We're not able to help as many people as we want. How do we go all in? And that was when I called you. Okay. I mean, because I felt like I needed help with the guidance of how do I actually spend the right way, whether it's time, money, efforts, resources, whatever. I knew there had to be someone that could guide this. And honestly, like I kind of got away from the podcast because it was like, oh, I'm doing this myself. But then like once I got back into that mindset of consistency and trying to better the practice all the time, I mean, it's been an incredible amount of growth in the last 9 months.
Yeah. It's really been awesome to see. So let's dive into the different strategies and try to kind of deconstruct those so that the audience can walk away with some really actionable things. What were the top, 2-3 things that really have kind of made the difference in this past year? And then we'll kind of dive into each of those.
Absolutely. So the main thing is I started my own podcast. I started a local St. Louis-based health and wellness podcast just called STL Active. And I had been talking about doing it for probably 6 months and just never really pulled the trigger. I don't know how to run a podcast. It seems expensive or challenging or whatever. And eventually got to the point where let's just try. I'll see what happens. And I think I spent less than $500 on all the equipment. And I have a pretty awesome setup for how I do things. I mean, Zoom is great, but I wanted the appearance for the what I was trying to do. I wanted the appearance that it was a super high quality setup.
Yeah.
So I've got, the mic stands and the adjustable everything and it just looks really quality.
Wires and cords.
The wires and cords, exactly. It looks legit. Exactly. Yeah, I got the monitor headphones and all that. So my whole purpose in starting the podcast was to find new referral partners. Part of my my networking that I'd been doing through BNI and the other groups was just meet as many people as you can. Well, you run into the gatekeepers at all these businesses, whether it's the front desk at a gym, front desk at a doctor's office, whatever. And there's just certain people that I was never able to meet that I knew could be a great potential fit. Those direct primary care physicians, the concierge doctors, those types of folks. I never even got an opportunity to talk to them. That being said, once I had a podcast and I was able to offer them the opportunity to be on my show to promote their business through me and through my network, it was a really easy door opener.
It is nice, isn't it?
It is really nice. So, I mean, how many conversations have you had with people that you never expected to actually answer it?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I mean, we're now reviving my clinics podcast for that reason. It's like, well, COVID has affected us all, of course. It's okay, but it could be better. So I was like, well, here are my strategies that I've used in the past. What might work? What can I do now working from home, like really being safe because of the kids? It's like, oh, I can revive the podcast, do it through Zoom. I know you're doing yours in person, but yeah, of all the things that have worked in the past, it made sense. And it's fun. I mean, I really,
it is fun. Yeah.
It really is cool. So,
well, that was what I was most concerned about, is like, this is going to be a lot of work. I'm going to have to edit it and it's going to take forever. And, there was a lot of negatives that I thought were going to be big negatives, but like, it's fun. It's fun to meet new people. It's fun to hear them like really open up about their business, their treatment style, their ideal clients, that kind of thing. So, I mean, I've enjoyed it way more than I expected to.
Yeah. And so before we get into like the step-by-step components of it, did you end up like hiring some help to do the editing, to do any post-production stuff for you?
Yeah, I just pay by the episode, and it's pretty simple. I try to do it in just one take, and I don't take stuff out. If it stumbles, that's regular conversation. That's fine.
Yeah.
It's not. I'm not trying to have a professionally produced, sound effects and all that stuff kind of podcast. It's just a conversation, so it doesn't need to be perfect.
Yeah.
Hire someone to put the bumpers on and take out the, if the horn honks in the background kind of thing.
Yeah. It can be pretty straightforward and simple. And what I try to remind, my students of when I get to do this, like you, not that you need reminding of this, but for others who are thinking about it out there, listening to this now, that yeah, you might end up hitting a home run and like building an audience where your audience actually becomes patients, but that would just be like, cream on the top.
Right. That was never a goal for me.
It's about getting a door to open and getting an hour with someone that instead of, groveling for 5 minutes of their distracted time,
right.
That's the key. That's the goal, to be able to develop those relationships. I'm telling, my team now, as we get this going again, like it doesn't, we need it to, like you said, appear, professionally done, In your case, it's like the equipment you bring, that kind of stuff. And another component, like for us, is like, I want the graphic to be something that they're like, wow, this looks great. I want to share this. Like, we want stuff that will compel them to share the link and share the graphics with their email list, with their patients, clients, put it on social. But how many people listen, or if we get any, actual patients coming from the show, it's not so important, and probably not going to happen that often. This is about these relationships and producing something that they feel like it made sense for them to spend that hour with you. And then, of course, when you produce something that sounds really, it's not like perfect, but it sounds good, it looks good, then they're more likely to like pick up the phone or be okay with that second meeting, which of course we know is very important as well to further develop relationships. So I just wanted to make that point, that's really the driver of this tactic. It's not so much like, all of a sudden being, Tim Ferriss with 500,000 downloads of every episode or whatever,
Well, that would be nice. That's definitely not my goal.
It'd be cool. So give us, we'll circle back to kind of like a step-by-step process of what you did, but results wise, how many referral sources, how many episodes have you done? How many referral sources do you feel like you've created, patients, et cetera?
So I've recorded, I believe, 26 episodes. I'm pretty sure we've only put out 23 so far. But it's gone well. I think I've probably created maybe 4 or 5 good referral sources, and the other ones are still non-existent. I still can have a conversation with them. It's just where to spend your time. I'm working on another couple of big projects right now, so following up with those people today is not a priority. It's fostering the relationships that are already referring. Yeah. I'd rather have the person that's referred 3 people in the last 6 months send a 4th, because I know what I'm going to get. Mm-hmm. Versus trying to create something new is challenging. So, I mean, if I had to guess, probably around 20-25% of the folks that I've interviewed have become referral partners.
Okay, that's great. That's really, really good, actually, I'd say. So I want to talk about follow-up and the ways that you do follow up and really develop the relationship. But before we get too far into that, if someone was brand new thinking about doing their own show, how would you guide them to do so? What are the steps that you would say, look at this, do that, here's a resource, try this piece of equipment, whatever?
Sure. So I use Buzzsprout, and they are the behind the scenes. I put all of my episodes onto their platform, and then they send it out to Apple and Spotify and all of that. The beauty of Buzzsprout is they teach you how to do everything. They want you to use their platform. So they have basically a coaching program on what equipment you need, and how to edit, and how to create the intros and outros and that kind of thing. So I found a podcast about podcasting that was created by Buzzsprout, and learned everything that I needed to know from them. So it was pretty easy. I probably just Googled how to start a podcast, and it came up fairly quickly. And so I followed that pretty much to the T when it came to like what equipment, what software, all of that kind of thing. When it came to actually being a podcast host, I did study some of my favorite podcasters just to figure out how to interview, because I wasn't really sure how to interview when it's not patient interview, So I studied Joe Rogan, I studied you a bit, I studied Eric Weinstein, a few of the bigger podcast folks that I liked, and I liked the way that they interview, just to figure out what kind of cadence and how to hold the right types of conversations to get the most out of people. And that, I think that was hugely valuable, just taking the time to sit down and write out basically a script, because it's the same interview almost every time. Okay. To an extent. I mean, truly, it's almost the exact same, but they all sound different because everybody's got a unique story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that was the first 2 things, and then
before you
the
go
last thing, yeah.
I just wanted to ask, like when you said, you were studying other podcasters and figuring out how to kind of create an interview that got the most out of that person, like maybe give us a little more detail on what you mean by that. Like, are you talking about like how you make it more about them or the questions you ask, or yeah, give us some detail.
Right. Basically how to make it more about them. Because the whole show, I may talk 5% of the show. I ask a 2 to 3 sentence question and then let them roll with it. And I'll, maybe ask a clarifying question, similar to how I'm talking most of this episode. It's your podcast, but it's my episode. You're trying to share my information. So that was part of it, is just trying to figure out what the psychology of an interview is, to make sure that it was beneficial to the audience, but also to the guest. So that was the first thing.
Mm-hmm. Some of your research on that, did you ever hear someone say something like, when you're interviewing, think in this way, or were there any like kind of aha moments of, oh wow, I never thought of that's a great idea, that you try to incorporate in your shows and your interview style?
Basically be their hype man. Like if you're introducing a band that's coming to stage, you're the big hype man yelling and getting the crowd pumped up. That's what I try to do without yelling. Just trying to have that energy to get them to tell their entire story and show their passion. Because if you just ask a question, they don't really care a lot of the time to answer it, because they don't see the value in it. But if it's like, if I ask a question like, the first one that came to mind is a physician that I interviewed who talks about why he's a physician. Well, it was because his parents had bad medical care and had these chronic conditions. And, I basically asked him, why did your parents' story, inspire you so much? Why did that matter so much to you? Well, he talked for like 20 minutes and almost went to tears. Like trying to get to the emotional side is so crucial, because if there's no passion, if there's no emotion behind what they say, nobody cares. It's the same thing with talking to a patient. If you can get to their emotional why, you're more likely to be able to help them.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Very good. Now I'm like, how can I get Greg to get emotional on this? No. All right. So then
it's a very meta conversation with the podcasting about podcasts.
Yeah. So then from that point, was there anything else in terms of interview style or things that you might want to pass on to the audience, anyone thinking about doing this?
Yeah, I created an intake form basically for my guests, because I wanted to know what they wanted to talk about. Mm-hmm. So that was a big changing point. It was probably maybe 5 or 6 episodes in it. They all felt kind of like a little slow. Like I wasn't quite getting exactly what I wanted. So I sent out like a 10, 15 question questionnaire before the episodes to really hear what their pain points were, hear what their highlights were, like what they were most excited about the way they treat or about the way that they work with people. And then use that to kind of create the questions that I would ask them. Cool. So it would kind of help. They would know what I was going to ask, because I was going to base it off of their interview. But I also had a way to craft it to where I could get the most out of each interview. I think that was a big turning point.
How long is that form? We send kind of like possible questions, kind of deal, but I love the idea of having them fill it out. I guess one, kind of initial thought was, how long is it and how many do you struggle to get them all to fill it out ahead of time, or do they all?
No, I would say probably 90% fill it out fully. And the ones that fill it out quickly end up being referral partners. So it's a nice way to weed out who to really follow up with.
That's a cool little side note.
Yeah.
It's fun. I don't know. It's not totally related, but like just yesterday, my buddy sent me this thing. that it was like a meme or like an image. It was like it said like $500 clients, and then underneath it's like $50,000 clients. And the $500 client, the comment was like, before we start to work and together and put in this kind of an investment, I really want to know, what you are planning to do and what you'll offer and blah, 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 and just on and on and on. And then on the $50,000 client, it says, money sent, thanks. Just like those.
They make it easy.
Yeah, they make it easy. They're responding quickly. It's like, okay, that's a really good. So I think I might need to do that as well then. How many questions and what do you ask in that intake form?
Ooh, it's been a while since I've looked at it, but it's stuff like, how many clients do you have that you work with on a regular basis? What is your specialty? What would you, or do you have any new offers that you'd like to discuss on the show? It's kind of just getting them to think about their business as well as their practice style. I also asked, is there anything you definitely don't want to talk about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's always an easy one. But I use a Google form, and then they can also put their logo, their headshot within there, so that I can make my
your graphic,
whatever you call it, the square, the image, all customized to them when I post it on my social and share it with them.
Who do you use for the post-production to create the graphic, to put together the audio clips and, publish it all?
So I send it off to an editor, and it's like $40 an episode to have it edited. And so that's with the bumpers on each end and tidying up and making sure that the levels are similar so that it's not blowing them out on one person and hard to hear the other. Yeah. And then my wife actually does the graphics.
Okay, cool.
My wife and my assistant, the two of them do the graphics. So, awesome. And then they put it on social media. So,
okay. So what's the process start to finish look like? You don't have to go into like crazy detail, but again, I wanted, people to really leave with an idea of like, what would this look like step by step? So first and foremost, I guess it'd be getting someone to say yes. And we talked about that in the mastermind group recently. And you've done a great job of finding and utilizing an assistant for that purpose. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And then we'll kind of go through the rest of the steps.
Right. So I use Jessica a lot for the initial contact. So if I wanted to interview a gym down the street, I usually go for private gym, that kind of thing. I would just have her cold call and say, who we are here with Judice Sports and Rehab. We've got a podcast called STL Active. It's a health and wellness podcast here in St. Louis. We'd love to have your head trainer or your owner or both on the podcast for an interview. Typically takes between 60 and 90 minutes. We can set you up on whatever time. She usually gives one or two time options. And I would say probably 50% of the people that we call and ask want to be on the show, which is why it's so nice to have, because, the response rate just cold calling a potential referral source is less than 1%.
Yeah.
So this is pretty good for that opportunity. So once we get them scheduled, then we send them the Google form, the intake form, if you will. And then we'll have her confirm with them a week or two, or, a few days or a week before the interview. So on my end, I am, obviously blocking that time from patient care, making sure that I bring all my equipment to the office, that kind of thing. But I do all my interviews in my office. I don't do them remotely, because I want them to see my spot. That's the other side, is I want them to see that this is a legitimate business and we're a real place that you should want to send your clients to in the future. So once they've been followed up with, then, if they have any questions or any concerns, need to reschedule, that kind of thing, she deals with that. Then basically they come in for the interview. I tell them it's typically, like I said, 60 to 90 minutes. It's rarely 90 minutes. It's typically 45 to 70 is about the longest I've ever had. But I use that extra time that I buffer for that up to 90 minutes as the time that I can actually get to know them as a person. They've already got to know me after.
Okay.
Yeah. So I kind of just introduce them to the equipment and do a sound check, make sure that they understand how it all works. I tell them what questions I'm going to ask so that they're fully prepared for what's happening. I want them to be fully comfortable. Then we do the interview. After the interview, I'll have 20 to 30 minutes to talk with. That's where the money is made, obviously. That 20 to 30 minutes after the interview to figure out what, if they said anything during the show that surprised you or that was like a pain point that they have issues with, that's when you capitalize. Is basically figure out what you can do to help them. If they said, you know, we have trouble with people with chronic back pain, it's one of our biggest such and such. Well, talk about how you can help chronic back pain. So it's basically using that time to show your value as a therapist, as a business owner, as a referral partner, and you're there to help them as best you can. It's not about me, it's about them. How can I help them?
Yeah.
And so then once the podcast is done and they're gone, usually that day, I'll send it off to the editor. It's back in less than a week. In the meantime, Jessica is working on the graphics. And then once she gets the episode back, we send it off to Otter to have it transcribed so that we can create a longer blog post out of it.
You'll transcribe the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. I mean, I thought about doing that, but I was like, man, that just seems like it would be a ton of text and having to go through and, you know, make it readable rather than conversational.
Well, we don't necessarily fix everything. We fix the first paragraph and then basically say, after this point, it's a transcription. So please be mindful of the grammar. You know, because it never spells my last name right.
Yeah. And yeah, because when I first saw your last name, I thought it was, you know, pronounced like the Italian Judice.
Right.
Judice, right?
Judice. Yeah.
Judice. Okay. Sorry. Now I know when I go back and record the intro that I'm saying that wrong. So have you, just kind of a side note, but on that transcription topic, and for those listening, he said Otter, it's OTTER.ai. which is a free transcription service, right? Because they use AI. They don't have a person transcribing it. And when you put that in there, like, do you have any evidence that has actually helped you rank it for certain things or SEO?
No.
Nothing yet. I was just curious about that because it's something that I'd consider doing if it was like, oh yeah, man, like I've started ranking for this and that and blah, blah, blah. But
right. Well, that's probably one of my next big projects is figuring out SEO and ranking and all that. And I just haven't made that a priority just quite yet. But no, I've not seen people finding the podcast just with random search.
Okay, cool. Right on. So you get it transcribed, you got the graphic made, which for those wondering, I mean, an easy way to do that is just go to Fiverr. If you don't have someone that's good with graphics, go to fiverr.com, find someone who will do, you know, you can pay them $5 or $10 to make a nice graphic. You know, you get a template that you like, and then they're just plugging in headshots and title, you know, with the logo, and, you know, just go from there.
And because it's St. Louis here, obviously we have the arch in the background of ours. Yeah, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, of course. So, you know, these are easy things to farm out. If you really like that kind of stuff and want to spend time on it, we use Canva. My team uses Canva.
Yep.
What is Jessica and your wife? Canva also. Yeah.
So yeah, once Jessica's done with the graphic creation and getting Buzzsprout up to date with the new episode and the descriptions and stuff, she'll send it to my wife, and then she'll schedule the social media posts.
Okay. And what platform do you use for social scheduling?
We'll use Instagram and Facebook pretty much. I think we do post on LinkedIn, but it's rare.
I guess I meant.
Oh, you meant for scheduling. Hootsuite.
Hootsuite. Okay. I'd used them in the past. We're on Buffer now. There's a lot of good ones out there these days. Okay. So she schedules out the social media with the graphic, and it's all driving traffic back to your website where the the whole transcript, but also the audio player is embedded. And guys, that's also one that you can hire out, or it's quite easy in most platforms to just add a new blog post, and then there'll be like a plugin if you're on WordPress that you can use that's for an audio player, and then you just sync the file to that plugin, and it's a little, play button, fast forward, rewind kind of deal. So don't let the tech of it scare you away, because you can get help or figure it out yourself, and it's really not as hard as you might think.
And I've kind of estimated what my costs are. Like after you get all the equipment, it's probably between $60 and $75 an episode that I end up spending. And it's only 2 hours of my time total, because I farm everything else out. The scheduling, the reminders, all the stuff that's on that back end, I don't do any of it. I have my assistant or my wife do it. And that's what makes it sustainable.
Yeah. I mean, $60, $75 for the opportunity to spend an hour with a potential referral source is, how many of those can I do a week?
Exactly. Right. Well, and that's, one referral source. I was doing the math the other day. One person that was on the show has referred me 3 folks that bought a package that have paid for the entire podcast, equipment, time, everything.
Yeah, there you go. Hey,
totally worth it.
I'm going to get out my calculator here. So you said that about, let's just say on the lower end, let's say 20% of your folks, become a referral source and send you at least one patient. The value of a plan of care, like the average plan of care value?
Around 900.
Around 900. Okay. So, let me think if I can do this math correctly. And you said otherwise it's 2 hours of your time, and how much? $60, $75?
Yeah, you can just use 75 high end.
$75 times, gosh, I might have dug a hole here on this. I don't know if I'm going to be doing it correctly, but basically $75 times 8, right? Because if about 20% become, then we've got a lot.
Like maybe let's do 5.
Okay, so basically you're probably spending at least probably somewhere between $375 and $500 to develop a referral source that sends you at least one patient that's going to be on average worth about $900. And of course, most of the time it's more than one.
Right.
So that's like a huge ROI, even on the upper end, if it's closer to 500, yeah, that's great. That's good math, good numbers there for sure.
Oh yeah. It's definitely worth it cost wise. And like I said earlier, it's fun to do. It's easy to do. And if you can farm it all out, it makes it a heck of a lot more sustainable.
Yeah. And so let's talk about follow-up, because that's obviously the next big step. Even if you spend an hour and you feel like you had a great conversation and whatnot, it's like, if that's the last touch point you have with them, a lot of times a referral source that would have been a referral source doesn't become one. So what does your follow-up system look like?
Right. So we've got, we have a CRM that we use to just keep track of all conversations. And within that, we will schedule follow-ups. So within the first 2 weeks, we'll follow up, or within the first 2 weeks after the recording, we'll follow up with them and ask them if they want to come in for a free consultation, just so they can experience what we do with the hands-on. Hopefully we can get them in for that. And it's not regular that we'll get those folks to come back for that, but occasionally. When their episode comes out, which is sometimes a month, sometimes 3 months after the recording, that's another touch point. So Jessica will let them know that it's coming, and she'll send them like the graphic if people want to get their social media up to date. Then once it's officially released, we'll send them the episode link that comes to our website, not to Buzzsprout, but to our website, so that if they do share it with their audience, with their email list, the doctor or the gym owner is sending their clients to our website, which is a positive thing. So those are at least 4 touch points. Then after the episode is out, we'll typically try to reach out one more time And then we put them into kind of a nurture campaign where we'll touch them every 3, 4, 5 months, depending on how the conversation went, where I think they could be. If they're a potential amazing referral source, we'll bug them for once a month until they tell us to leave them alone or until they start referring people.
What do you mean by bug us? But I mean, you know, obviously not bugging them, but like, what would those touch points look like, whether frequent or infrequent? What kind of give us?
Well, part of the beauty of the intake form is we ask for their cell phone number. So we do have another way to get in touch with them that's not just through the gatekeeper.
Little learn something new every day. I like that. Okay.
There you go. So you can get through the gatekeeper by texting them, "Hey doc, you know, it was great getting to talk to you a couple months ago. I'd love to follow up. When would be a good time to chat for 15 minutes on Zoom?" Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be a big, long, perfect letter or a form letter or anything in particular. It can be a 3-sentence text message. Mm-hmm. And that's just as fine. It doesn't have to be something in particular.
Great. And that's, you know, I love, you kind of briefly mentioned it with the intake, but also just the conversation itself, guys, is that then guides you to set up unique follow-ups, you know, unique to them. Then the time after, they have 3 kids, and one of them, you know, recently was, you know, getting interested in lacrosse, and now I know lacrosse is coming up the season. That's like a perfect thing. Okay, I'm going to reach out and say, "Hey, I know lacrosse is coming up. Did your son decide to move forward with it? If so, I can do a free injury assessment, you know, injury risk assessment," or, you know, like those kind of unique things that you pull from the conversations you had, and then you can schedule out, you know, follow-ups that are actually like responded to, and make them think, wow, they really listened and they really, you know me. And so that's really cool. And you guys will just have in your CRM, you have like a system where you can just schedule them at whatever rate you want.
Exactly.
It's not necessarily like an automated series of emails. It's unique to them and specific.
Correct. Yeah. And I know we had in our mastermind call last week talking about automation versus personalized touch points. And it's important to have both. So they're going to get our monthly newsletter drip campaign type of thing, but they're not going to get, you know, unless they're a potential good referral source, they're not going to get the text message from me.
Yeah.
So okay. That's I think a difference maker, and just showing them that we're willing to make relationships with people. Mm-hmm. I mean, most of the people I'm having on the show are concierge docs, or like we had one of a world-renowned stem cell guy in here a couple months ago. Like that's awesome. That's really cool.
What's his name?
David Crane.
Okay, to look him up. I'll have to listen to that episode. Send me a text.
Okay.
Or is it out yet?
It's either out this week or next week. It'll be soon.
Share that one with me for sure. You know, I'm very interested in stem cell stuff now for my kids. All right, so I think that kind of puts a bow on it from start to finish. That was a beautiful little master class. I appreciate you taking the time to get through that. And share that. So I would, before we finish up though, like to ask if there's, you know, are there other things that have been really impactful for getting things going? You know, someone who maybe doesn't decide to move forward with, like, I just call this like the experts corner, you know, podcast show approach. And by the way, guys, it doesn't even have to be a podcast. It could just be interviews on Zoom that are recorded and it's a video show. Again, it's not so much about like where you put it or the audience you build. It's about getting someone to say, yeah, I want to be on your show, you know, and spending time with you, or you do it in person and it can be video as well. So, but you know, for those who maybe don't want to move forward for whatever reason with that idea, what were some of the other things that kind of took you from where you were just kind of low level, but not really doing what you wanted to do, to the growth we've seen, you know, in this past year? So
targeted networking, I think, is huge. Rather than just meet with anyone and try to have a conversation with everyone, like pick out your top referral partners and figure out why they are your top referral partners so far. Then go after people like them. You know, whether you're using the podcast as a networking tool or not, doesn't really matter. But having targets and goals and a system for following up with those people is crucial. And I have a different business coach that I use for that. And that's been a game changer as well. So, it's, I guess the other part is hire a coach. I mean, don't try to do it yourself, because you're not going to be good at it. If you've never done this before, you're not going to be good at it. So make sure that you find someone that can help you. So between you and my other coach, I feel like I'm in a really good spot right now. And, systematizing things is obviously crucial. And I know you talk about that in the podcast, but also in the mastermind, that it all fits together, right? Now I have a system for the podcast. Well, it's super efficient for me. I now have a system for following up with potential referral sources, and it's really efficient for me. And I'm trying to systematize what I do so that when it's time to hire, I can hire pretty easily.
Yeah.
So I think that that's kind of the two things: is hire a coach and create the right systems for what you need right now.
Great. And let's talk about the coach part of it too. And I just would point out that, here we have Greg, and he's really done some awesome things with growth of his business, systematizing. It's been so fun to be a part of. And he's got two coaches. I just invested $27,000 into my business coach just for this year. And so I know what I would suggest, and I will get into it, but before I do, I'd love to, ask you, Greg, what were the factors and the things that kind of helped you made the decision about, one, getting a coach in the first place, if maybe it wasn't a no-brainer, I don't know. And then two, kind of how you chose your coaches.
I mean, for the same reason that professional athletes have coaches. I mean, you can be good at something, you can be a good therapist, but I'm not a good business owner yet. Like I'm working towards it, obviously. But it's not about, I don't know. I kind of put my ego aside to finally realize that I need help, and I was tired of doing it the cheap way. And, hiring a coach is not cheap, but it sure is effective. I've never been disappointed with anyone I've ever hired when it came to education and, helping me cross a threshold or cross a plateau to get to that next level for my business.
A lot of people are disappointed, here and there, but so that's good to hear. And then, there's obviously a variety of coaches out there. What were the things you're looking for, and the factors that help you make those decisions?
That's tough. Man, I think someone with the experience of the solopreneurship was important to me. Like, I don't necessarily care to meet an executive coach for someone that's working for a Fortune 500 company with thousands of employees, right? That would be nice to say that it's on your resume, but do you know what it's like being the only person that's in your business ever? Unless your coach can say yes to that, like, it's not going to be helpful for my situation. So yeah. I think the specificity to what I do now and what I was doing when I hired that person is crucial. And, that made it easy because I'd listened to your podcast. I got to know you without knowing you through your show. And I know you were on your own for a while, and then now you've been able to hire, and I don't know, you've done it. You have the proof that you've done it. So I knew that hiring you was going to be a good idea.
Yeah. And that's a good point. I'm glad you brought it up, is as people are looking, well, first and foremost, just making the decision to, if you want to get somewhere faster, finding someone that can get you there faster, as opposed to just trying to figure it out on your own. But, someone that actually has the past experience of being where you're at, and then, either the current or past experience of getting to where you want to go, and maybe they've gone even further than that. But, whoever is at the level that you want to be at, or beyond that level, like, that's who you need to be, guided by, not someone who maybe got there like 6 months ago and decided, okay, now I'm going to try to make some money online, and I've had a practice for 6 months, and I'm going to, start sending emails and social and, call myself the next business coach.
Right.
So, considering experience and how many people that they've helped do what you want them to help you do, I think is super important. And then like sometimes when I'll be on calls with people who are considering, and I mean, as far as the cash-based niche, I'm friends with pretty much everyone that's doing it and, or has been doing it for a while, at least. They're great people. They've been huge supports. We all work together and support each other. And I just say, you're not gonna go wrong with any of these folks that we just mentioned by name. It really comes down to like personality fit. We all have different personalities. I think there you just got to figure out what, whose personality is best fit for you and will motivate you in the right way, or, push the right buttons in you to get you where you want to be.
Absolutely.
I think personality fit is something else to really consider in those scenarios. Experience and making sure they've done and are doing what you want to be doing or get to, and then personality fit. Well, man, this has been great. And again, I know I keep saying it, but it's really been so fun to work with you this past year and see how quickly things have really been taken off. It's been really exciting. So any parting thoughts for those listening, whether thinking about starting their own practice or they've already got their own practice and they want to improve?
I think the big thing is just go all in early. I guess I kind of never fully committed. Even though I was not working another job, I had my wife's income as a backup and just, it'll grow slow and that's fine. And I think just get after it. If you're really passionate about this and you really want it, like just go get it today. Go get it the next 6 months. There's no reason to wait and do things slowly, because it doesn't have to be slow.
Yeah.
You can go as quickly as you want with this. You can work as hard as you want with this and build it as, however it works for you.
Perfect. Great parting advice. I appreciate it so much. And maybe a year from now, we'll do a round 2 and you can talk about all the people you've hired and
I would love to.
Working on right now. All right, man. Thank you again so much.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Cash-Based Practice Podcast. If you liked what you heard here today, we have some extremely important things we want to send you. First, a quick start guide to cash-based physical therapy and Medicare. This free ebook will provide the primary rules and regulations surrounding this confusing but important topic. Secondly, we want to share with you the 5 characteristics common to all successful cash-based practices. Find out the vital things Jared has learned from years of interviewing cash practice owners and running his own successful cash practice. As one of our listeners, we want to give you all this information absolutely free. You can get it right now by going to drjaredcarter.com/success. Again, that's drjaredcarter.com/success. Go there now to get your copies, and we'll see you next time.